To discuss this, I'm joined from Baghdad by Ahmed Rushdi. He's the foreign policy advisor to the Speaker of the Iraqi Parliament. In Erbil is Noreldin Waisy. He's an Iraqi Kurdish journalist. And from Washington, we're joined by Douglas Ollivant, Senior Vice President of Mantid International and a former advisor to US Presidents Barack Obama and George W. Bush, having served as the Director of Iraq for the National Security Council. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on the Newsmakers. Ahmed Rushdi, first of all to you, is the Kurdish Regional Government being punished for holding that referendum back in September?
Well, actually, I think it's not a matter of punishment. It's a matter of understanding to each other between Baghdad and Erbil in a way to reach up. What we reached today is that the Prime Minister actually declared that the airports in Erbil and Suleimania can the international flight be there, and it is some sort of cooperation between the Iraqi government and the KRG in taking over those two airports. In a way or another, it means that all the problems between Baghdad and Erbil, it looks like it will be solved before the elections. Especially there are talks about the salaries for the employee inside KRG, that it will be launched by the Iraqi government, and there are some sort of settlements to the crossroads for the customers and so on. All these issues on the table of the Prime Minister himself and also the Parliament in a way or another, just to solve problems before the elections and to say is that Iraq is united and also we can manage all our problems by ourselves.
Noreldin Waisy, what do you say to that? And also, why did you boycott the vote on the national budget?
Actually, this is good news today that the Iraqi Prime Minister announced the lift ban on international flights. But I cannot say that, we cannot shorten all the problems, as your guest in Baghdad saying that all problems will be solved before the election, because the problems between Baghdad and Erbil is not just limited to flight bans or share of budget. There are a lot of political problems. We have, KRG has a lot of rights in the Iraqi constitutions, which is violated, this is a good step towards starting to solve all the problems, and Iraq, has to respect the constitution, which was voted by almost majority of Iraqis in 2005, and Iraq was built after 2003 on the partnership principle, on respecting the constitution, which is unfortunately until now a lot of articles from constitution is violated by Iraqi government, and there are a lot of main disputed issues between Erbil and Baghdad, which has to be solved. Otherwise, the circle of problems will continue.
Yes, it's quite clear from both of your initial answers that there are a number of issues between the KRG and the central government in Baghdad. You're referring to the elections that are going to happen later this year, which will elect a president and a parliament. You're talking about the lifting of restrictions on international flights coming in to the Kurdish region in the north. So just to give a bit of perspective about what you're saying, Douglas Ollivant, does the KRG have a case here when it comes to the national budget and that 5% reduction? The budget itself is $88 billion. At that conference in Kuwait last month, which Iraq wanted $88 billion to rebuild the country, if the national budget is the same as the amount needed to rebuild the country, $88 billion is not nearly enough to cover every different spend that the government needs to.
I think that's essentially Baghdad's point, that it could afford to give 17% to the KRG, although I don't think any observer any longer believes that the three northern provinces constitute 17% of the Iraqi population. But during luxurious times when oil was at $120 a barrel, that could be done and everyone was still happy. The issue is the Iraqi constitution is remarkably vague. And I think what we're seeing now is a reinterpretation of exactly how it's going to be applied. The old order that we had, where you could fly into the KRG without a visa, and the KRG was exporting oil on its own, and the KRG got 17% of the budget, that was a viable interpretation of the Constitution. But I think the new order as well, where the KRG is getting 12 or 13% of the budget, and you must have an Iraqi visa to fly into Erbil or Sulaymaniyah, and in which the oil exports are more strongly controlled, is also a reasonable interpretation of the Constitution, because the Constitution is simply so broadly written that either of those are viable interpretations.
Noreldin Waisy, surely the fundamental question is whether the Kurds in the north of Iraq feel part of Iraq in terms of their identity. Are they Kurdish first and Iraqi second, or is it the other way around?
Actually, as we know, in the referendum, September 25th, it was, majority of Kurds, more than 91%, they voted for yes to independence. But meantime, as KRG officials always said that this is not a step or immediate step towards independence. But the problems come from Baghdad, which is treating Kurds as, second citizens. It's been 2 years or more than almost 3 years that Iraq cuts the budget of, employees in Kurdistan, and they refuse to supply Peshmerga forces with heavy weapons during the ISIS war. They, violated a lot of rights of Kurds in the constitution. There's a lot of problems in the disputed areas, and which is now controlled by Iraqi forces after October 16th, 2017. I think the Kurds in Kurdistan region, they feel that they are not, they have no rights in Iraq, and their rights are violated, and they feel they are treated as second citizens.
Ahmed Rushdi, what can the Iraqi government do to address those concerns?
Well, actually, first of all, does the referendum concern legal in Baghdad or not? Does the referendum concern legal in the regional countries, according to the regional countries, according to the international communities? We must put something on on the table on a real base. The Constitution made the problem, and at the end, the referendum made the problem, and at the end, we need to know exactly what the referendum will end with, which is something very crucial to Baghdad and for the regional countries and also for the international community. This is first. Secondly, we all know that the KRG, they export oil without the permission of Baghdad. It's another issue, which means that the budget from this oil export by the KRG is not known to the Iraqi government. According to the Constitution, there should be some sort of a committee that between the central government and the local government and the KRG to deal with the financial issue about the exportation of oil. Now, the third thing, which is also very important, is that we need to settle down some sort of a memo of understanding about the crossroads, about how to deal with the borders of Iraq as Iraq, which is also, according to the Constitution, it is some sort of mixed relationship between the central and the local governments, which is now happening in the airports, which is going to happen according to what KRG accepted and also Baghdad accepted, is that there will be some sort of mixed management for the airports, for the international flights. All these things need to be managed well, need to have a roadmap, and at the end, just what Douglas said is that we have a constitution that it's broadly actually has a wide explanation, a wide think of explanation can be done with this constitution, but at the end, we should consider that the benefit of Iraq, as a united Iraq, is the most important thing.
Okay, let's pick up on the point of a united Iraq, Douglas Ollivant. More than 92, or just about 92% of people in that September referendum in the north there, the Kurds saying that they wanted to have their own state. Is independence eventually an inevitability? And if it were to happen, what would be the effects on Iraq itself, not just for the Kurds, but for the rest of the country?
I think that independence for the Kurds certainly independence is in the heart of all Kurds. We all know that. So the results of the referendum were no surprise. Every Kurd wants an independent state. But the devil is in the details. Do you want an independent state if it's going to be simply a wholly owned subsidiary of one or more of the neighbors? Do you want your own state if it's broke, if it can't support its people in anything approaching the standard to which they've become accustomed? I think the answer to those questions is no. So now we're looking to see what arrangements can be made, what arrangements will come about. I know there are many pockets of the Kurds who are alienated from Baghdad right now. I suspect that if the salaries start coming from Baghdad after the failure of Erbil to pay them on any regular basis for the last 2 years, that might go a long way towards smoothing over any hard feelings that are still in place because of the referendum and the aftermath.
Noreldin Waisy, when I just put that question to Ahmed Rushdi about how the Iraqi government is going to address your Kurdish concerns, it seems to me as if the thing that Ahmed was really pushing was this concession that the government has given about the airports. But that's only one thing. Give Ahmed another concrete proposal. Give him 2 proposals, if you like, about what you want specifically done by the Iraqi government.
Yes, Iraqi government, after 2003, it was built on the, mainly consensus and partnership principles. So Iraq cannot be governed or ruled by majority. As we know, Iraq is a multi-ethnic, multi-religious country. So it has to be a consensus between all components in Iraq. And of course, Kurds are the main component. And so until the national rights of Kurds in Iraq are not respected, then there will be disputed issues between Kurdistan and Baghdad. So even the next elections will not solve any issues, as some people believe and think. We have to, because unfortunately in Baghdad, there are a lot of politicians, they even want to change the constitution or rewrite the current constitution, which is somewhat agreed by, Kurds in Iraq.
Noreldin, forgive me, you're again talking in generalities. Ahmed, do you have specifics that the Iraqi government is prepared to concede to the Kurds, or is it just too dangerous to talk about issues like that publicly and those kind of discussions only happen behind closed doors?
Well, frankly speaking, the Prime Minister and the Parliament actually pushed the 5 committees that between Baghdad and Erbil. It's a committee for the airports, for the salaries, for the oil, for the Peshmerga, and also for the crossroads, for the borders. So all those committees is actually now working day by day to solve the problems between Baghdad and Erbil, which means that technically speaking, we already have something on the ground. Ended for the first file for the airports. I think it's now solved. Now we are seeking for the second priority, which is the salaries for the employee in Kurdistan, which is, I think, the Iraqi government also will push hard to pay the salaries. And as working is going on with those technical committees, there will be some sort of political settlement between Baghdad and Erbil. I want you to say something about how to deal with the situation now. Especially, Iraq actually has a debt about $120 billion, and the oil prices actually is not helping. And all this, and we have also some sort of other financial crisis. That means KRG must also share the crisis with us, because, or let's say, share the solving of those crises. Because if we won't be together in one road to actually end all those crises for all of Iraq, it won't be helpful for KRG also, because at the end, the Iraqi government cannot, well, let's say in the future, will not pay the salaries again, because it's already, the budget is already actually heavy with debts, and we have so many commitments with the international community. Well, in Kuwait conference, all what's happening, actually the 38 billion, it's already on investments and debts. There is no something called donations. The donations actually happen with small numbers. So all these things must share between Baghdad and Erbil to solve all those problems.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the Newsmakers.